destructive leaders up here, and then those leaders have the characteristics of being charismatic. They have personalized power. They're narcissistic. They have negative life issues, and they have that ideology of hate. Now, if
Beyond that, they're pretty nice people.
now, if you think about the person that you thought of who made you feel this way, were they still getting the job done? Like, were they still accomplishing what they had to? And the fact is that if you look at, well, in my personal experience, if you look at my supervisor on paper, you would say, wow, this person is doing an awesome job. But when you think about what's going on the inside, terrible, you know.
Well, but that can be deceptive, because what you find is that if you look at some of the longer term studies of toxic leadership, what you find is that people like this in the short run can get away with the bullying tactics and the incidents of this, but over time, then that deterioration, it has its negative effect. University of Louisville, the dean at the University of Louisville, who was there when that was one of the things that caused me to decide to move down here. That guy's still in jail. University of Louisville School of Education to this day has not recovered, and that was 6 years ago that he left. So from the 5 years prior to the time that I left, and then the 6 years since, and they're still struggling to get back because of the long term. In the short term, he had made some of the measurable ways of looking at a college of ed go up.
Right.
But the long-term effects of what happened to the faculty and all of those measures since, that has been a real losing proposition for the College of Ed there. And so that often is the case. And so people have the mistaken thing, well, these people are wonderful workers, we'll whip these workers into shape. And in fact, it might work for a year or two because of fear of loss of job and those things, but the long term, those things do not work.
And the thing too is that the people in administration, they sometimes don't know the inside story, because I remember reading up on that whole case in Louisville, and up to the point where he was going to be convicted. The president of the university was defending him and saying that he was actually an awesome dean, you know.
Well,
so they're
all of the complaints about him, in
were
President
dismissed.
Ramsey's words, direct quote, all the complaints are a bunch, quote, of anonymous crap, unquote, until he was indicted.
Exactly.
And then it was, oh, we knew it all the time.
Exactly. So it's, it's one of those things where there are lots of facets to the issue then.
What, do you want comments here or no?
Sure.
Okay, I was just gonna say, years ago I read the book The Peter Principle. I don't know if this is totally, but it has to do with leadership. But at some point, you do good at a certain job and you get promoted and you do good at that job. But at some point, we all are we can be promoted above our level of competence. And I actually worked with a pastor at a church there, and it was the same thing. It just, when you said hasn't recovered yet, I mean, I worked at this thriving, wonderful church, and it still hasn't recovered. And like the associate pastor left, I left, and then they finally fired him, and like half the church had almost always, not half of them, but a lot of people had left by then. And it's so sad because like the guy that's the pastor now is really awesome, who was there years and years ago as a lay person, and his wife made the comment to me, I look out into the congregation and I see seats where these people should have been,
Yeah.
and you all aren't there now, and it's like people, with me, it was like I worked there, so they're like, and then I got this other, really great job, but it was like, they're all, well, she's got a job, she's fine. Well, but that was my life for over half my life.
And not everybody was able to get a good job when they left.
Yeah, well, we have, the guy that left before me, and like I didn't have to leave, but I could just see the writing on the wall, and I just felt like it would be better for me to just remove myself. But the first guy that left was our associate pastor, and he's like a brilliant guy. He said, and he's an excellent Bible scholar and teacher, he said, I will never work in the church ever again. And I don't feel that way. Like if something opened up, I might, and the minister of music left too, and he's done that. But this is like an awesome guy. And the pastor first blamed everything on him, and then he left and it didn't fall apart. So then when everybody else was leaving, and then afterward, I really from my counseling standpoint, he had personality disorder, and he didn't recognize it, and every time we would try to make a good suggestion, he would take it as a personal attack. And so it really could have worked had he let us help him, but, so I mean, like, lots of places can be, I mean, the church wasn't totally destroyed, but, you know, it would probably take 20 years to get it back where it was. But the other thing too was, sometimes like the committees that put these people in positions of power, like he should have been fired like a long time ago. Like one Sunday he overslept and didn't show up for church, and we're all scrambling to try to put the service together, you know, and just things like that. And we're all thinking, there's no way they're going to keep keeping him. But the people, the committee that hired him, or that, you know, made the recommendations, they thought it would look bad on them if they got rid of him. Where if he'd have been gotten rid of like 2 years before, things could have recovered. But they just kept thinking, oh, it'll get better, and finally they, you know, had to. So,
Folks,
anyway.
I've been saying for a long time that if you want to understand ultimately why toxic leadership, you have to look at who hires the toxic leader. And oftentimes, most times, the boards or the groups that are responsible for this don't trust employees, think that employees are lazy. The only way to motivate them is to hire somebody that will motivate them through fear and put the pressure on them and micromanage them, and that they don't like teachers, or they don't like this group or whatever. And it is really an anti-employee, anti-professionalism of the workers by the board that hires the toxic leader, who is going to whip those people into shape. Ultimately, that probably more than anything else explains why. And there was a superintendent in Jefferson County Public Schools when I first went to U of L. And the guy had all kinds, he was Cheshire Cat in personified. I mean, you couldn't trust him as far as you could see him. And eventually, he had used up enough political capital for making some decisions. Every time you make a hard decision, you lose that. So he was leaving on his way out. And some of my colleagues were just rejoicing. And I said, it's not going to make much difference. The group that hired him is going to make the next hire. And they hired a clone.
Well, I learned.
So, I mean, just
Yeah.
think about that.
I learned a valuable lesson in another situation too. I was on site base at the middle school when my kids were there, and we hired a principal. Well, I learned I was actually there for 2 principals, but this one guy came in, answered every question perfectly, great interviewer. We called the references, everything was good. He was awful, and I was the first to say, we've made a terrible mistake. Finally, praise the Lord, he left. But I learned then, being on that committee, we screwed up. I wasn't one of those. I said, yeah, we screwed up. We should have called all the teachers at the schools that weren't on his references.
Right.
You know, you don't just call because when you call the references, they're like, oh yeah, he's right, he's awesome. We should have called teachers.
Well,
at the
one,
school
you
that
don't
was-
put you don't put a reference on there of somebody that wouldn't speak highly of you. And
Exactly.
2, sometimes the people won't tell you the truth because they want him gone, and they give you,
Exactly.
Like, oh yeah.
boy, this person's
Yeah.
great, hire him, yeah.
Exactly.
Boy, I'm glad he's gone. I mean, so,
Keep you, they give you a bad reference.
Yeah, well, yeah,
You're a
they
good worker.
could, but.
Steve, to that, sometimes they ask, do you want us to contact this person? I mean, what if you say no? That's a red flag right there.
yeah.
I would call them.
So that brings me actually back to 2 points that I'd like to make. I know Steve just mentioned not just, but a few, the case up in Louisville. That dean was he was this close to getting away. If it weren't for the embezzlement of the grant funds, he would have got away because he already had another job lined up that he was going to move to at the end of the academic year. And it was when they started finding out about the fact that he had misappropriated all the funds for the grants that's when he got caught. So he was just moving from ruining the Department of Education at U of L to ruining the Department of Education at this new school. So that's what happens oftentimes. Because if they're not doing anything and they don't get caught too, that's as serious, that's breaking the law, then oftentimes they don't get caught and they're able to move on and just leave that path of destruction along the whole way. And then the other thing too that was mentioned was the fact that the hiring committee, they're just gonna hire a clone, right? So And that brings us to the third part, the second part of the triangle, which is the conducive environment, where there's a lack of accountability, there's no system of balance and checks in place, there's instability from transitioning from one supervisor to the next, and all of that. And then we cannot control the hiring committee. We can't control the school boards. In Joetta's case, like, she had some say in hiring, but oftentimes that's not the case. So what I wanted to focus on was the followers. Now, these researchers, they classified two groups of followers. You've got the colluders and the conformers. Now, the conformers are the people who they know that what's going on is wrong, but they don't have a choice. There's nothing that they feel powerless. There's nothing that they can really do to stop what's happening. They're kind of sitting and waiting for the board or the hiring committee to step in and get rid of the person. And then you've got the colluders who they not necessarily that they agree with what's going on, but they have their own motive, and they know that if they go along with what's happening, they not only execute his agenda, but they can also experience upward mobility. Like, they can move up in the ranks by joining forces with this person, because he's in that position for a reason, and if you align with him, if you form that alliance, then you can get ahead in your career. In terms of gaps or issues in the research, a lot of the focus thus far has been on the leaders, and very little has been done where the followers are concerned. That research there, Thorogood, I know you can't read it, so I'll read it to you. It is important that destructive leadership researchers begin to take into account the critical role that followers play in the enactment and persistence of destructive leadership in organizations. To date, there has been a dearth of research on susceptible followers in the leadership literature. There isn't much on what followers can do to prevent all of this from happening, and how they actually enable the destructive leader.
Before you go on,
And you're
kudos.
done whenever you're ready, your time, because
Okay.
we were talking.
All right.
Yeah.
Kudos on that slide, because remember the problem defined section? She's got 2 bullets there, both of which, if she had like 4 of those, and maybe you have 2 more coming, but if you have 4 of those, and then you send this, she's finished her dissertation, she sends this off to as a manuscript, and she talks about, in the literature, there's this, and this. She talks about those 4, and the way she's done it, then that makes that editor or those blind reviewers thinks, boy, this is going to be significant research because it's going to address these 4 areas. So the way you've set that up is really good. You'll have to expand that, but but that in turn, and notice that on one of them, she already has a citation to support that.
And then the other one too is the fact that they're not acting alone, and this is what impacted me. At the school where I was, everybody disagreed with what was going on. There were like a handful, like maybe of a faculty of 16, right? It was a very small school. There were probably 4 people that were colluding with the director, but the rest of us knew exactly what was going on. We knew it was wrong. We knew that what she was doing was not benefiting the kids in no way, shape, or form, but we didn't do anything. We all felt helpless. So the fact is that they can't do it alone. If it were just that one person standing up against everybody, they'd have to quit eventually. The factors of the environment and the followers come together to facilitate the inappropriate behavior, and so there needs to be further research on what exactly the followers do to contribute to this situation. And these same guys who developed the triangle, they said that we assume that destructive leadership is an interaction between leaders, followers, and environments. That was the triangle that they made. But there is little research on the fact that there is that interaction of the 3. For example, it is possible that a group of mature, confident, and socialized followers could nullify the potentially destructive effects of a hateful narcissist. So why, Joetta, weren't you guys able to come together and oust him? You know?
Yeah, I guess because I was like almost on the same level as him, and we did speak up and we did say things as kindly as we could. But, you know, you have to like have a business meeting and you have to like vote him out, you know, and I know he was talked to numerous times. Like, we knew he was kind of odd when he first came, but, you know, you just don't know until you work with somebody, and he would be like one way and one in meeting. And so the whole congregation didn't see it for a while, because we were trying to help him, but then, you know, we just kept thinking something will happen. You know, we said as much as we felt like that we could, being a co-staff person, you know.
What-
But finally, everybody just, when we left, everybody had to left.
Her point about environment is important.
Yeah.
My wife, who teaches middle school in southern Indiana, is in a school where there's a destructive principal. And the teachers are really powerless to do anything about it, because the superintendent and the board are of the same mindset. That is, they don't trust teachers, they don't like teachers, and Indiana, within the last 2 years, has done away with all tenure protections. So teachers in Indiana no longer have tenure. And so anybody who squawks, you're gone. And the gone may be because you speak up, or because you don't go to the right church, or you don't kowtow, or just play, I'll do whatever you say, sycophant, you know, to the extreme, or you're not young and pretty, or you're not the right gender. I mean, there's all kinds of that kind of stuff, but teachers are just, you know, they're afraid because they no longer have any kinds of protections. And when the superintendent and the board
Yeah.
are of the same ilk, then,
It goes
so,
back
you
to
know,
they had
but
to do something
that
illegal.
points out the environment is also a part of
Yeah.
that. It's not just the followers, sometimes the environment protects that kind of leadership.
Yeah, in my case, the inappropriate activity was blatant, and the board was, I don't know, they're just a non-factor. She controlled the board, basically, you know. So it was, we couldn't do anything, and we kept saying, well, can't the parents see that what's going on is not right? Can't they see that, you know, she's using school funds to do this? Can't they see that the kids are not being treated fairly? Can't they see that this kid was expelled just because she didn't like the family, you know? And
You don't have to prove illegal or like immoral as in not having an affair, but immoral as in having an affair with this underage thing. You know, those are pretty much in education,
Yeah.
the only two things you can get rid of somebody for.
okay, and then I do have. So and then the next question is what, you know, or the problem is what can the followers do? And this long quote basically says that.
Okay, we're kind of running short on time.
So
Can
I'll
you
skip that.
skip through?
Okay, sure.
There you go.
I'm not quite certain what the purpose of my research should be. I know I want to focus on the followers, but I'm not sure what direction it should take.
Okay, it comes back to the issue, from whom or from what are you going to be able to get data to address these issues that you just laid out? Are you going to get that from teachers, who is your database? Who do you see as your population and sample?
Teachers,
What level? K-12, higher ed,
higher ed.
Huh?
Higher ed,
faculty members?
faculty members, yeah.
Okay, and you are addressing faculty members' perceptions of,
Their immediate supervisors.
so it'd be department chairs or department heads?
chairs, yes.
Okay,
Okay. These were the research questions that I thought of, but I'm not very confident in them.
okay. First of all, right off the top, scan those. Are those qualitative or quantitative questions? Those are qualitative questions. You don't have anything, are there differences between, or is there a relationship between this and that? Those are all qualitative questions. So that would suggest that if you want to do that, that you're going to have to do interviews or focus groups or something of that nature. Is that what you were thinking?
For me personally, I would love to do a quantitative research because I love numbers, but I don't know how realistic that is. You know, if there's no, you know.
But you see what I'm saying? There's nothing there that would represent a quantifiable figure. She's not asking for differences between variables. You're not asking for relationships between variables. The only way you could get answers to that is get people's perceptions about these issues.
So my question is this: can you just jump from this huge gap in the research to identifying variables and jump into a quantitative study, or do you always have to start?
In
with
general, if you go into an area where there's not much known, and you say, okay, I want to do a quantitative study of this. I want to design a survey and do a quantitative study of people's attitudes and beliefs and practices related to that. If there's not much known, how are you going to write quantitative survey questions that will be insightful enough to get the nuances that you want to investigate?
Okay.
Probably not going to be very successful at that. On the other hand, if you first do, when there's not much known, a qualitative study, and you have these extensive interviews. Granted, you may only do 15 interviews, but if you interview people with diverse backgrounds, by the time you analyze those interviews, you may then go back and say, okay, now I think I can write a survey that will capture the issues I want. So almost always the progression is, if not much is known, do qualitative studies first, followed up later then by quantitative studies that can say, okay, now can we put this in a way that can be measured with larger groups and see if what we found from a group of 15 holds up with larger populations. So the sequence is often qualitative first, then quantitative.
And would that be, because I know you said yesterday that, you know, you don't want to get it too complicated and too long. So would that second quantitative part be within the scope of
If you
dissertation?
if you did interviews, you could either do interviews of selected individuals or maybe even focus groups of individuals that would that would get at those kinds of issues. So that would
And then
certainly
that
be
would be
that. Oh, absolutely, folks. If you have 15 interviews that last 45 minutes to an hour, you're going to have, by the time you write everything up and finish that and analyze all those data, you're probably going to have 200 plus, maybe 300 pages worth of dissertation just to analyze. Heidi Crocker, who was one of mine, did 14 interviews that lasted from an hour to an hour and a half, partly because the people that she was interviewing were so into what she did that she just couldn't get them off the phone. And she had like 160 pages single-spaced of transcripts from 14 interviews. That's a lot of data.
Yes.
See, so, and her dissertation goes about 350 pages by the time she analyzed all that. Her results chapter 4 alone, was 80 pages just because there was so much information in those transcripts. See, so if you're asking, would interviews of 15 people be more than enough for a dissertation? You betcha.
okay. And then that would be the chapter 2 outline. And my pen.
All right, what do you mean by me?
That's my research. I didn't know what to put there, so I just put, that's the dissertation there, the intersection.
All right, but you got to name that something. By the way, she was struggling with this, and when she stayed after class last night, I was asking her some of these questions. She finally said, I really think I want to study department chairs and department heads. And so after we do that, within about 3 minutes, we had figured out those three,
Those three.
flip back.
Here.
Higher education,
I changed it from department heads to the faculty and staff
Oh,
since I
okay.
want to focus on the followers.
okay.
Because I don't think that I have the wherewithal to go after the big dogs.
Alright, and don't you think you should actually call that toxic leadership
In the
in the circle?
here,
Yeah.
in the circle, okay,
Yeah.
I'll change that. Oh, here.
Because if you don't, then you'd have toxic would be a level 2 head under that,
Okay,
and I think you want toxic leadership to be a level 1 head.
right. Okay,
And you need to come up with something other than me, which is, represents what is the intersection of those three.
but would it be it can be the research question, right?
No, it's not a research question, it's the intersection of those in terms of your
it would be-
your chapter 2 outline. You remember your chapter 2 outline starts with introduction, ends with summary. Well, then you'd have introduction, leadership, higher education, faculty and staff, and then whatever the intersection is, and then summary.
So would it be something like higher education, faculty and staff experiencing destructive leadership? Would
Yes,
that-
although you'd have to make that as succinct. Then that's what it is, then you have to figure out how to say that in about 5 or 6 words.
Okay,
But that's what it is.
all right.
Are you focusing on faculty and staff perceptions of toxic leadership in
Mhm.
higher education?
Yeah.
Right.
Especially if she does qualitatives.
Okay.
Awesome.
You got a lot done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had about 3 slides yesterday, and then
And then,
I was inspired.
and by the way, remember what I said about talking to me? Did talking to me last night help?
That helped a lot, because I only had 3 slides before.
Okay, so, it does help to talk to me. It also helps, like in Sarah's point, it sometimes helps to talk to somebody who knows that field, and I've suggested she go spend some time with Kristen Wilson before she makes any final decision.
That's helped too, because I got so this came out of a final paper that I did for another class. It was on destructive leadership, well, a 2-part assignment. So I had a lot of the research done already. I just didn't know how to put it together, and that's where Steve came in.
We'll take a very short break, and then Joanna's on. No, wait, Joanna's not on.
I'm Joanna. Joanna's not here today.
Joanne's off, and so who was gonna take her place today? Who volunteered to go today from the second group?
I offered.
You did? Okay.